Cassandra Reed stood barefoot in the dimly lit hallway of the five-star Manhattan hotel, clutching the edges of her silk pajama top while trying to process the disaster she had just created. Her door was locked, her keycard inside, her phone also inside, and worst of all, the hallway security camera was probably capturing every humiliating second of her standing in nothing but pale pink pajamas, hardly the image of the powerful CEO of Reed & Co., a leading marketing firm that had just closed a multi-million-dollar deal hours ago. "Unbelievable," she muttered under her breath, pressing her forehead against the cool wood of her suite's door. The late hour meant the hallway was mostly deserted, but the sound of an elevator dinging down the hall made her stomach drop. Maybe she could slip away unnoticed, find the front desk, and get a new key before anyone recognized her. But fate had other plans. A deep, masculine voice spoke from behind her. "Locked out." Cassandra whipped around, her heart hammering. Standing a few feet away was a man tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a fitted black t-shirt and dark jeans that made him look effortlessly put together. His tousled brown hair was slightly damp, like he'd just stepped out of the shower, and his sharp green eyes held a mix of amusement and curiosity. She straightened her posture, trying to summon the confidence she usually carried in boardrooms. "Yes, unfortunately." His lips twitched, but he didn't laugh. "You need help." Cassandra hesitated. Every instinct told her to handle things herself, but unless she planned to camp out in the hallway all night, she had no choice. "Do you work here?" He raised an eyebrow. "No, but I know the staff. I can call someone for you." "That would be great," she exhaled, relieved. "Thank you, Mr. Mateo Hayes," he said, pulling out his phone. "And you?" "Cassandra Reed." His fingers paused on the screen, and something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition. She was used to it. Her face had been on Forbes' top entrepreneurs under 35 last year. But he didn't treat her like a celebrity, and for some reason that unsettled her. "Impressive," he said, dialing a number. "You built Reed & Co. from the ground up, right?" "I did." She folded her arms, suddenly aware of how exposed she was in her pajamas. "And you, what do you do, Mateo?" He glanced at her, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "Construction." Somehow that fit him. He had the build of a man who worked with his hands, strong, capable. Within minutes, a hotel staff member arrived to unlock her door, and Cassandra sighed in relief as they handed her a new keycard. "Thank you," she said, turning to Mateo. "I really appreciate your help." "No problem," he said easily. Then, without missing a beat, he added, "You owe me a drink." Cassandra blinked. "Excuse me. You were locked out in your pajamas." "I saved you from further embarrassment." His green eyes gleamed with mischief. "That's worth a drink, don't you think?" She should say no. She had meetings in the morning, reports to review, and a strict rule against socializing with strangers she met in hotel hallways. But something about Mateo made her pause. He wasn't intimidated by her success, nor was he trying to impress her. For once, she was curious. "Fine," she said, tilting her chin up. "One drink," Mateo grinned. "Tomorrow night, then." Same hotel bar, deal. As she stepped inside her suite and closed the door, Cassandra leaned against it, exhaling slowly. What had she just agreed to? Cassandra adjusted the strap of her black cocktail dress as she stepped into the hotel's dimly lit lounge. A soft hum of conversation filled the air, accompanied by the mellow notes of a jazz pianist in the corner. She scanned the room, searching for Mateo. He was already there, seated at the bar with a glass in front of him. His posture was relaxed, one arm resting against the counter, his gaze focused on something in the distance. The moment he noticed her, his expression changed an almost imperceptible shift, as if he hadn't expected her to actually show up. "You clean up well," he said as she slid onto the stool beside him. She accepted the compliment with a slight nod. "I could say the same about you." Mateo had traded his casual attire for a dark button-up with the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, revealing strong, tanned arms. There was something about the effortless way he carried himself, confident but never showy. The bartender approached, and Cassandra ordered a glass of wine. Matteo raised his own glass in a silent toast to unexpected encounters. She clinked her glass against his, taking a small sip before setting it down. So tell me, Matteo, why construction? He exhaled slowly, as if deciding how much to reveal. It's what I know. My father owned a small company, Hayes & Sons. I started working with him when I was a teenager. Learned everything from the ground up. You took over the business. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, but there was a weight to it. Not exactly. My father passed before I had the chance. The company folded soon after. Cassandra hesitated. This wasn't just small talk anymore. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago, he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. I moved on. Started my own thing. No fancy office or corporate board, but I keep busy. There was something admirable about that. He wasn't chasing power or prestige, just carving out a life on his own terms. And you? He asked, tilting his head slightly. Why marketing? She exhaled, leaning back slightly. It wasn't the original plan. I studied finance, but somewhere along the way, I realized I hated numbers without a story behind them. Marketing lets me build narratives, shape brands. It's strategy and psychology wrapped into one. Matteo studied her, his gaze sharp. And you like control? Cassandra's fingers tightened around her glass. I like results, he chuckled. Same thing, isn't it? Before she could respond, a voice interrupted them. Daddy, Cassandra turned just as a small figure barreled toward them. A boy, no more than 6 or 7, with the same green eyes as Matteo. His dark curls were slightly tousled, and he wore a tiny button-up shirt with jeans. Matteo caught him effortlessly, lifting him onto his lap. Luca, what are you doing down here? A woman approached mid-40s, kind eyes, wearing a crisp white blouse. I'm so sorry, Matteo. He woke up and wanted to find you. Matteo nodded in understanding. It's all right, Maria. I should have known he wouldn't stay asleep. Cassandra blinked, processing the scene. She hadn't expected this. Matteo turned to her, a flicker of something unreadable in his expression. Cassandra, this is my son, Luca, and Maria, our nanny. Luca looked at her with open curiosity. Hi, she softened. Hi, Luca. The boy studied her, then turned back to his father. Are you on a date? Matteo cleared his throat. We're having a drink. Luca seemed to consider this, then turned back to Cassandra. Do you like dinosaurs? Caught off guard, she hesitated. I suppose I do. Luca's face lit up. Me too, my favorite is the T-Rex, it's the strongest. Cassandra couldn't help but smile. That's a good choice. Matteo ran a hand through his hair, looking both amused and resigned. All right, buddy, you've officially crashed my night. Luca yawned, resting his head against Matteo's chest. I missed you. Something in Cassandra's chest tightened at the tenderness in the boy's voice. Matteo's hand instinctively cradled the back of Luca's head, his expression softening in a way she hadn't seen before. Maria stepped forward. I'll take him back up. Matteo hesitated, then nodded. He pressed a kiss to Luca's forehead before handing him back. I'll be up soon. Luca looked at Cassandra one more time. Bye, lady. Bye, Luca. As Maria carried him away, silence settled between them. You didn't mention you had a son. Matteo exhaled. No, I didn't. Why? He met her gaze. Because most people hear single father and assume they know the whole story. Cassandra held his stare. And what's the real story? His jaw tightened slightly. Luca's mom left when he was 3. She wasn't ready for this life, and I wasn't going to force her to stay. There was no bitterness in his tone, just quiet acceptance. Cassandra wasn't sure why, but that honesty hit harder than she expected. Matteo leaned back, watching her carefully. You regret coming down here yet? She considered that. A few hours ago she might have, but now, she took another sip of her wine. Not yet. Cassandra didn't know what made her say yes when Matteo asked to see her again. Maybe it was the way he had handled his son with such ease, or how he hadn't tried to impress her with empty words. Whatever the reason, she found herself sitting across from him the next evening at an intimate Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The warm glow of candlelight flickered between them, casting shadows on Matteo's strong features. He poured her a glass of wine without asking, as if he already knew she'd accept. "I have to admit," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I wasn't sure you'd actually show up." Cassandra tilted her head slightly. "Why?" "Because I'm a CEO with a packed schedule." He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Because you seem like someone who keeps her world tightly controlled." She lifted her glass, taking a slow sip before responding. "I make time for what matters." Matteo's gaze didn't waver. "And does this matter?" A question she wasn't ready to answer. Instead, she set her glass down and changed the subject. "Tell me something, Matteo." "What's the hardest part about being a single parent?" he exhaled, his fingers drumming lightly against the table. "Worrying that I'll never be enough. That Luca deserves more than what I can give him." Cassandra hadn't expected that level of honesty. Most men in his position would have given a polished answer, something vague about sleepless nights or balancing responsibilities. But Matteo didn't hide behind pleasantries. "You love him," she said simply, "with everything I have." "Then you're enough," she said, meaning it. Matteo held her gaze, something shifting in his expression. "And you?" "What's the hardest part of being Cassandra Reed?" She hesitated. No one ever asked her that. People wanted to know about her success, her strategies, her next business move. But Matteo wasn't asking as an investor or a competitor, he was asking as a man who wanted to understand her. "Never knowing who actually sees me," she admitted. Matteo frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She traced the rim of her glass. "Most people see the title first, the power, the company, the money. They assume they know who I am. But very few actually look past that." Matteo didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, more thoughtful. "I see you." Something in her chest tightened. She wasn't sure why his words affected her so much, but they did. The waiter arrived with their food, breaking the moment. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the conversation shifting to lighter topics: travel, childhood memories, the best and worst meals they'd ever had. But when dinner ended and they stepped outside into the crisp night air, the tension between them was undeniable. Matteo turned to her, his hands in his pockets. "Can I walk you back to your hotel?" Cassandra hesitated. She had a driver waiting, but something about the idea of walking through the city with him felt right. "Yes," she said. They strolled side by side, the distant sounds of traffic filling the spaces between their words. "At what point," Matteo asked, glancing at her, "did you know you wanted this life?" "The power, the company," Cassandra thought about it. "I was 16 when my father's company collapsed. One bad deal and everything we had was gone. I decided then that I would never be powerless again." Matteo nodded, as if he understood that kind of determination. "And have you kept that promise to yourself?" "I built something no one can take from me," she said. "So yes." Matteo stopped walking, turning to face her. "But does it make you happy?" Cassandra opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. She had spent years chasing success, building her empire, ensuring no one could ever make her feel small again. But had she ever stopped to ask herself if she was truly happy? Before she could come up with a response, Matteo reached out, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed against her skin, sending a shiver down her spine. "I don't think you stop long enough to ask yourself that question," he murmured. Cassandra swallowed hard. "And what about you? Does your life make you happy?" Matteo smiled, but there was something wistful about it. "Luca does, that's enough for me." She wasn't sure why, but his answer made her chest ache. They reached her hotel, and Cassandra turned to him. This was the moment where she should say goodnight, where she should walk away and pretend this was nothing more than a pleasant evening. But she didn't want to. "Come inside with me," she said softly. Matteo's jaw tightened slightly, as if he was weighing his options. Then, after a long pause, he nodded. Cassandra led him through the lobby and into the elevator. The tension between them crackled like a live wire. When the doors slid shut, she turned to him, her breath shallow. Tell me this isn't a bad idea, she whispered. Matteo's hand brushed against her hip, his touch deliberate. I won't lie to you. The elevator doors opened, and Cassandra stepped out, her heart pounding. She didn't know what she was doing, but for once in her life, she didn't want to think, she just wanted to feel. And Matteo Hayes was making her feel everything. Cassandra had never seen her hotel suite in this kind of silence before. It was the kind of stillness that felt alive, charged with something unspoken as she turned to face Matteo. The city lights streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow over his face, emphasizing the sharp angles of his jaw, the quiet intensity in his green eyes. Neither of them spoke at first. Words felt unnecessary. The air between them was thick with something that wasn't just attraction, it was deeper, heavier, something neither of them had planned for. Matteo was the first to move, stepping closer, his fingertips grazing the length of her arm, slow and deliberate. Cassandra's breath hitched, her body attuned to every inch of space between them. You're dangerous, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Matteo's brow lifted slightly, amusement flickering in his gaze. How so? You make me forget about everything else, she admitted, feeling the vulnerability in her own words. His hand slid to the small of her back, pulling her just close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from him. Then maybe, he said, his voice rough, it's time you stop thinking so much. Cassandra's breath caught as he lowered his head, his lips brushing hers in a way that sent a pulse of heat through her veins. It wasn't rushed. Matteo kissed like a man who knew exactly what he wanted, but more than that, like a man who wanted to make sure she did too. Her hands found his shoulders, gripping onto him as she lost herself in the way he felt, the way he moved against her. It was something new, something she hadn't realized she had been craving until now, someone who wasn't intimidated by her success, someone who saw her as more than a title, a reputation. As the night stretched on, time ceased to exist. She didn't think about meetings, deadlines, the weight of expectations that usually pressed on her shoulders. With Matteo, it was different. It wasn't about power plays or control, it was about being seen. When the city outside began to pale into the soft hues of dawn, Cassandra found herself tangled in the sheets beside him, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. She had never been one to linger in moments like this, but something about Matteo made her hesitate. She turned onto her side, watching as his eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the early light. He studied her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then, without hesitation, he reached for her, pulling her against him. You're not running away, he observed, his voice still thick with sleep. Cassandra exhaled a soft laugh. Should I be? Matteo's fingers traced absent patterns along her spine. I don't know. But I wouldn't let you anyway. Something warm curled in her chest at his words. She wasn't used to this, to someone holding on to her, to someone wanting her to stay. But before she could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the suite. Cassandra frowned, sitting up slightly, expecting someone. Matteo's gaze darkened, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. No. She slipped out of bed, pulling on the silk robe draped over the chair before making her way to the door. When she opened it, a woman stood there tall, striking, with dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail and eyes that held an unmistakable familiarity. She didn't need Matteo to tell her who this was. Lucas' mother. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the woman's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I figured I'd find him here. Cassandra arched a brow, keeping her expression unreadable. And you are, the woman's gaze flickered past her toward the suite. Elena, Lucas' mother. Cassandra didn't know what she had expected, but the directness of her tone caught her off guard. Before she could respond, Matteo's voice sounded from behind her. What are you doing here, Elena? Cassandra stepped aside as Matteo moved past her, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. Elena crossed her arms. I came to see my son. Something about the way she said it made Cassandra's stomach tighten. Matteo's jaw clenched. After all this time, Elena exhaled, tilting her head slightly. I made mistakes, Matteo. But I want to fix them. Cassandra felt like an outsider in this conversation, but she also knew this wasn't her battle to fight. Matteo was the one who had been there for Luca, the one who had picked up the pieces when Alina had walked away. Matteo's voice was quieter when he spoke again. You don't get to just walk back in and pretend everything is fine. Alina's gaze flickered to Cassandra then, something knowing in her expression. And what do you think, Cassandra? Cassandra met her stare evenly. I think Luca deserves people who won't leave him when things get hard. Alina's lips pressed together, but she didn't argue. Instead, she nodded once, as if she had already expected the resistance. I'm staying in the city for a few days, she finally said. I'll be at the Parkview Hotel if you decide to let me see him. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving a tense silence in her wake. Cassandra exhaled slowly, turning to Matteo. Are you okay? Matteo ran a hand through his hair, his usual composure cracking just slightly. I don't know. Cassandra hesitated, then reached for his hand, squeezing it once. You don't have to figure it out alone. Matteo's gaze softened as he looked at her, something shifting behind his eyes. I don't want to. And just like that, Cassandra knew this wasn't just something fleeting. This was something real, something worth fighting for. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid to let herself want it. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the city's skyline, as Cassandra sat across from Matteo in a quiet corner of her rooftop cafe. The scent of freshly brewed espresso lingered in the air, mingling with the distant hum of traffic below. Despite the warmth of the day, a tension clung to the space between them, unspoken but undeniable. Alina's unexpected arrival had shifted something, not only in Matteo but in Cassandra as well. She had spent years building walls, ensuring that no one could shake her sense of control. But Matteo had slipped past those defenses so effortlessly. And now, she found herself in unfamiliar territory, wanting to stand beside someone when their world felt uncertain. Matteo stirred his coffee absent-mindedly, his gaze distant. Cassandra didn't push him to speak. She knew he would when he was ready. After a long pause, he finally exhaled. Luca doesn't even remember her. Cassandra rested her elbows on the table, watching him carefully. And you're afraid that'll change if she comes back. Matteo's jaw tightened slightly. I don't know what she expects. She left without a single word. No calls, no letters, just gone. He shook his head, his voice quieter. I swore I'd never let Luca feel abandoned again. Cassandra reached across the table, her fingers brushing against his. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. You don't have to make any decisions right now. Matteo looked up, his green eyes searching hers. And if I let her back in, Cassandra's stomach twisted, but she didn't let it show. Then you'll do it for Luca, not for her. His grip tightened around hers, and for a moment it felt like the rest of the world faded away. Later that afternoon, Matteo took Luca to the park, letting the boy run between the bright green trees, his laughter filling the open air. Cassandra watched from a nearby bench, her heart warming at the sight. Matteo had told her she liked control, and maybe he was right. But watching him with Luca, she realized something. Love wasn't about control. It was about choosing to stay, to show up, even when things were uncertain. Matteo sat beside her, watching Luca with an unreadable expression. I think I'm going to let her see him. Cassandra turned to him, studying his face. You're sure? I don't know if I'll ever be sure, he admitted, but I won't let my pride get in the way of what's best for him. She respected that about him. He wasn't just making this decision for himself, he was thinking about Luca first. That evening, Matteo arranged for Alina to visit. Cassandra sat in the hotel lounge, giving them space. She didn't know what she expected to feel, but as she sipped her wine, she realized something. She wasn't afraid of losing Matteo. Because this wasn't just something fleeting between them. It was real. When Matteo found her later, there was something different about him. She was careful with him, he admitted, sitting down beside her. Didn't push. Just listened. Cassandra nodded, waiting. She told him she was sorry, he exhaled. I don't know if I can ever trust her again, but Luca. He deserves to have all the pieces of his life, even if they don't fit neatly together. Cassandra reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. You're doing the right thing. Matteo turned to her, his expression softening. And what about you, Cassandra Reed? She raised an eyebrow. What about me? His thumb brushed over her knuckles. Are you ready to stop holding the world at a distance? Cassandra felt something inside her shift. She had spent years guarding her heart, but Matteo had never asked her to give up control. He had simply asked her to let him in. And for the first time in a long time, she wanted to. She leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to his lips. It wasn't rushed or desperate, it was a promise. I already have, she whispered, and with that, everything fell into place. Cassandra stood on the balcony of her penthouse suite, the wind gently teasing loose strands of her hair as she gazed out at the glittering Manhattan skyline. The past few weeks had changed everything. She had come to this city expecting nothing more than another business deal, another contract to secure. Instead, she had found Matteo. And with him, she had found something she hadn't even known she was missing. Behind her, she heard the soft sound of the suite door opening. She didn't need to turn around to know it was Matteo. His presence was something she felt before she even saw him. Strong, steady, real. He joined her at the railing, his arm brushing against hers as he leaned forward, staring out at the city. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. There was no need for words. Then, finally, Matteo exhaled. Luca asked me something today. Cassandra turned her head slightly, watching him. What was it? Matteo's gaze remained fixed on the city below. He wanted to know if you were going to stay. The words sent a ripple through her chest. She had spent so much of her life moving forward, never allowing herself to linger in one place for too long. But this was different. Matteo was different. Luca was different. What did you tell him? She asked softly. Matteo finally turned to face her, his green eyes searching hers. I told him I hoped so. Cassandra's throat tightened. She had never been the type to make promises she couldn't keep, but this was something she wanted to promise. She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. I don't want to walk away from this, Matteo. Something shifted in his expression, something raw and unguarded. Then don't. For a moment, all she could do was look at him. This man who had stepped into her life so unexpectedly, who had challenged her in ways she hadn't anticipated, who had made her feel things she had long convinced herself she didn't need. And then, as if there had never been any other choice, she rose onto her toes and kissed him. It was a kiss that felt like a decision, like a promise not just for tonight, but for the days and years ahead. When they finally pulled apart, Matteo rested his forehead against hers. Move in with me, Cassandra's breath caught. Matteo. I know it's fast, he said, his voice steady, but I also know what I want, and what I want is you. I want Luca to have you in his life, not just as someone who visits, but as someone who stays. Cassandra had built her world on logic, on calculated decisions, but love wasn't about logic. It was about trust, and she trusted him. A slow smile curved her lips. Yes. Matteo exhaled, as if he had been holding his breath, and then he kissed her again, this time with the kind of certainty that left no room for doubt. Weeks later, as Cassandra stepped into the house, Matteo had chosen for them a beautiful home with wide windows and warm wooden floors. She realized something. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just building an empire, she was building a home, and that was worth more than anything.